So, James Gunn's Superman is right around the corner, and it feels like the perfect time to be a Superman fan. I can't go 5 seconds without seeing the guy. I'm talking Superman shirts, Superman toys, Superman ice cream, Superman Fortnite. It's Superman frenzy out there. And here's hoping that excitement can be carried over to the comics and the source material. Everyone already knows about amazing comics like All-Star Superman and For All Seasons, but what about the ones that seemingly nobody talks about but deserve to be considered up there with the all-time greats? So here are some underrated Superman comics that deserve more love. Am I turning into a Superman channel? Honestly, probably. I don't know. I listen, I just like talking about the guy, okay? Is that a crime? If it's a crime to like Superman too much, lock me up and throw away the key. If you're looking for the best first comics to read for Superman, I've always recommended Superman Smashes the Klan by Gene Luen Yang and Gurihiru, For All Seasons by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, Birthright by Mark Waid and Leno Francis Yu, Up in the Sky by Tom King and Andy Kubert, and the GOAT of all GOATs, All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Whiteley. All great comics, you can't really go wrong with any of them. Seriously, All-Star is one of the greatest works of art of all time, and the fact that Gunn is pulling so much from it for the movie is a really, really good sign. But here's the thing. And also, I feel like a lot of people just stop there when it comes to Superman comics. They read the greats, the Mount Rushmore, if you will. And then, because those are the only comics people seem to talk about, they're not sure where to go from there. For some reason, finding your second comic is always harder than your first. When the Man of Steel has a huge array of amazing stories, literally over 85 years worth, that don't seem to get that same level of spotlight. So whether or not the books I talk about today are underrated is really up to you. Let's be honest, that word doesn't really mean anything anymore. But instead, my focus here is on stories that I don't see enough people talk about, but deserve to be in conversation along with the all-time greats. You can find all these comics either at your local comic book store or with the affiliate links down in the description, or they're all available in the DC Universe Infinite app. But before we get started, this video is brought to you by Fabletics. Fabletics is a premium activewear brand that combines performance with style and affordability. They make workout clothes that are designed to look good, feel good, and actually keep up with your lifestyle. I am not much of a workout person, if that's not evident from, you know, everything about me, but I'll tell you what I am. And that's a walker, baby. I love going on my walks. I'll go out to a mall and just walk around and not even buy anything. And oh my God, I know a theme park hates to see me coming. And Fabletics has versatile activewear that actually fits that lifestyle. I don't feel like I'm just wearing workout clothes. I feel like I'm wearing good, high quality clothes that I like that just so happen to be great for workouts. And I'll tell you what, it's really nice when it's getting hotter and hotter out. Oh my God. And the thing that I think is really cool is Fabletics VIP program. Each month you get 1 credit that you can use on any 2-piece outfit or any single item worth up to $100. As well as daily savings up to 50%. The membership is totally flexible, so if you don't want anything that month, you can just skip it and you won't be charged. You also get early access to new drops, VIP only sales, and even a free membership for their Fit app. Click the link in the description to get 80% off your order when you sign up as a VIP member today. It's honestly a killer deal if you're someone like Clark Kent who keeps ripping his shirts all the time. Thanks to Fabletics for sponsoring this video, and thanks to my patrons and channel members who help make these videos possible for just $1 a month. The first book that I think deserves more love is Superman's Secret Identity from 2004 by Kurt Busiek and Stuart Immonen. Right off the jump, this book is a little different. It's not your standard Superman story or even really an Elseworld book set out of continuity, or it kind of is. The book follows Clark Kent, who has a very similar name to Clark Kent, the fictional character of Superman. In the quote-unquote real world, Clark gets made fun of at school for his name, and he's grown to despise Superman comics. But one day, he starts to develop powers all too similar to the Man of Steel, and he starts using them to help people, taking on the mantle of Superman. This is genuinely one of my favorite Superman comics ever made. It frankly might be one of my favorite comics, period. It's one of those books that when I start thinking about it, I can't stop thinking about it until I read it again. It's such an amazing love letter to the character and a meta-analysis of what makes him so special, literally stripping every single aspect of him away, throwing him into the real world and seeing where he fits. Funny enough, it was inspired by the idea of Superboy Prime, just without any of the crazy, fucked up reality destroying stuff. And instead of just being a dark and edgy Superman doesn't fit in the real world that we've seen a million times, Busiek does the opposite. It's literally a story about how Superman, the character and the symbol, changes and betters people's lives just by existing. There was a Batman equivalent of this concept, also by Busiek, with art by the late John Paul Leon, called Batman Creature of the Night, and I would love to see more characters get the same treatment, like Flash, Wonder Woman, and Green Lantern. Whether or not this book is underrated is up to you. I see it get talked about a little bit, but not nearly to the degree that I think it should. Also, I think a lot of people get it confused with Secret Origin by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank, which is your more run-of-the-mill origin story. I've talked about it before, and someone responded, and they were like, I don't like the art in the scene with Clark and Lex in Smallville. That doesn't happen in Secret Identity. The next Superman comic is Superman Space Age from 2022 by Mark Russell and Michael Allred. The book is a 3-issue miniseries that follows Superman between 1963 and 1985, with each issue being set in a new decade. It's really similar to Spider-Man Life Story by Chip Zdarsky and Mark Bagley from 2019, if you're familiar with that. That book is one of my favorites for how it frames these characters against the backdrop of real history, and Space Age is no different, probably because it was written by the same guy who wrote Fantastic Four Life Story. So that would do it. That would do it. It's a really interesting experiment, viewing not just Superman, but the greater DC universe like Batman, Flash, and Green Lantern strictly in this era of the space age, all building toward a calamitous event in 1985, which is the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. One thing that's really cool is it justifies Jonathan Kent's apprehension to Clark revealing himself to the world as him being traumatized by his time in World War II, a time when we were supposed to be the good guys saving the world, but still committed horrible things. And it reminds me of New Frontier by Darwin Cook, which is one of my favorite DC comics ever made. But where that book is about McCarthyism and these characters coming to terms with the failing of the country they once stood for, Space Age is more about the nuclear age, the fear and dread of the unknown that filled the world after Kennedy's assassination. There's a line in it that I really like, and it's kind of like a through line of the book. Jonathan asks Clark if everything's going to be okay, and he says, no, everything will not be okay, but that's all right. And I like that. I don't know, it's like, fuck, that kind of hits different nowadays, you know? There was a sequel book with the same creative team last year called Batman Dark Ages, but I have not read it. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't even know it existed until I started making this video. The next book that I think deserves more love is Superman Peace on Earth by Paul Dini and Alex Ross from 1998. This one-shot follows Clark during Christmas as he decides he wants to end world hunger. He uses his powers to distribute to those in need around the globe, but he realizes that it isn't just about providing food. It's about addressing deeper and social economic issues. So even with all this power, the complexity of humankind's flaws means that truly saving us is out of even his control. But instead, it's up to us to save each other and help our fellow man if we want to achieve peace on Earth. It's written by the genius Paul Dini, who you probably know from the Arkham games and the DCAU, or my personal favorite, The Only Time Hush Was Interesting. And just like any comic illustrated by Alex Ross, the art in this book is absolutely stunning, with these huge double-page spreads that give his work the space to breathe that they deserve. As to whether or not it's underrated is again sort of questionable. It's not one of Ross's more well-known works like Kingdom Come or even The Marvels, but any Alex Ross book is going to be huge no matter what. But I'm including it here purely for the reasoning that finding this book, along with Ross and Dini's other works, can be kind of hard if you don't know where to look. For years, these books were basically non-existent, since the single issues and any trades collecting them just stopped being published. But thankfully, it just got recollected last year as Justice League: The World's Greatest Superheroes, so you can read Peace on Earth along with Batman War on Crime and Wonder Woman Spirit of Truth, as well as their books about Shazam, the JSA, and the JLA. All of these books are some of my favorite stories for their respective characters, at the very least just to see more Alex Ross art. The next book that I think deserves more of a spotlight is Superman Kryptonite by Darwin Cook and Tim Sale from 2007. Technically, from the issues of Superman Confidential, this story follows Clark's first encounter with Kryptonite. It starts and he's in his early days of his career. He knows that he's doing good, but he still doesn't really have a full grasp of his mission just yet. Up until this point in his life, he's basically been in... That was weird. I don't know what happened there. He's forced to confront the reality that he can be hurt, that he can die. And that shakes him. It makes him question what kind of legacy he might leave behind. Whether he's doing enough with the time he has, but also how that impacts his relationship with Lois. It honestly might be something they pull from when it comes to the movie. The imagery of the battle-damaged suit we keep seeing kind of implies those ideas. And I could easily see David Superman have to grapple with that kind of mortality. This story is one of my favorite uses of Kryptonite. Normally, it's mainly just a plot device for Superman to get beat up by the bad guy. But here, it's an allegory for doubt, for uncertainty, dread, the fear you have about the thing in your life that will be your end. And that even if you're Superman, the man of steel, to treat every second like it could be your last, to always be willing to die for what's right, but also to always tell the people in your life how much they mean to you. I also just adore this creative team. Darwin Cook is one of my favorite comic creators of all time, like with his work on Batman Ego and Catwoman and New Frontier. Honestly, the only thing missing from this book is that he didn't draw any of the art himself, and so he got the next best thing. Tim Sale, who is one of the most prolific artists of all time, with his work on For All Seasons and The Long Halloween, with a style that literally could not be replicated. But despite these two massive powerhouses, weirdly, I don't really ever see anybody talking about it, despite it basically being a spiritual sequel to For All Seasons. The next book is less of a Superman book, but whatever, I'm counting it anyway, it's that good. And that's Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen from 2019 by Matt Fraction and Steve Lieber. Jimmy Olsen is no stranger to having some amazing comics, most notably with Jack Kirby's run of the book starting in 1970 with number 133. Not only was it Kirby's first book since leaving Marvel, but Kirby saw this quote-unquote joke book as a backdoor of sorts, a way to sneak in all of his absurd and crazy ideas that he's always wanted to try within the medium of comics. And that led to the book revitalizing the character and becoming one of the most influential in the entire industry. It's literally the first appearance of Darkseid, for God's sake. And this revival from Fraction and Lieber takes that same spirit and delivers probably the best Jimmy Olsen story since that original Kirby run. It follows Jimmy as he becomes the sole heir to a billion-dollar fortune, accidentally fakes his own death, and ends up being hunted by assassins, all while unraveling a conspiracy about the Olsen family name. Also, Matt Fraction is going to be on Batman soon, and oh my god, it's going to be so good. I fully believe that Jimmy Olsen is one of the most important characters to the whole of Superman's mythos, not only because of his legacy with the Kirby run, but also because he showcases something so special about Superman that not many others in his supporting cast can. He showcases the ways that Superman impacts the people on the ground, how his very existence literally lifts them up and inspires them. And there might be something in the pipeline that I've been working on for a while that I can't talk about yet. because I still don't know if it's happening. You know, it's all very vague right now. But if it does end up happening, I'm very excited about it, so stay tuned for that. Also, this book has genuinely my favorite joke ever in a comic with Gorilla CNN. It doesn't get better than that. Why are we even making new comics? Let's just wrap it up at this point. The next Superman comic that doesn't get enough spotlight is Superman Last Son, written by Jeff Johns and Richard Donner with art by Adam Kubert from 2006, as well as the sequel book Escape from Bizarro World by Johns and Donner with art by Eric Powell. The story follows Clark and Lois, who discover a young Kryptonian boy who crash lands on Earth. They take him in and adopt him as their son, naming him Chris Kent, but they discover he's not just a random survivor, he's instead the son of General Zod. This book is overall incredible. It's probably Jeff Johns' best work of his career, if you ask me, which is saying a lot because love him or hate him, that dude's he's made a lot of comics and he's made a lot of really good comics. The exciting thing to me about this book is that it's co-written by both Jeff Johns, but also Richard Donner, director of the original Christopher Reeve Superman movies. I think the conversation around those movies has gotten kind of muddled lately with how much people compare everything to them, but you can't argue with the fact that Richard Donner had so much love for this character. That movie defined so much of how we see Superman, and that vision came entirely from Donner's love for the original comics, including the Golden Age. It's not really clear how much Donner was involved with the actual writing process for Last Son, or if it was just the idea for the story, but still a lot of that DNA is there, and this kind of feels like a spiritual successor to those movies. Granted, we also got a literal successor to those movies with Superman 78 by Robert Venditti and Wilfredo Torres, which was also a really good book, but you get what I'm saying. Honestly, this whole era of the mid-2000s doesn't really get talked about enough, if you ask me. Starting with Up, Up, and Away by Johns and Kurt Busiek with art by Pete Woods, it was a great jumping on point for new readers post-Infinite Crisis and managed to stay consistently great for more than 3 years, all the way up to the New 52. But my favorite part about Last Son isn't even technically Last Son, but more so that it led to the creation of the next comic I want to talk about, and that's Action Comics number 847 by Dwayne McDuffie and Renato Guedes. This single issue, titled Intermezzo, was a tie-in story for Last Son. It follows Jonathan and Martha Kent during the events of Last Son when Clark had gone missing. Martha is terrified that the world is going to end and that her son is dead, so Jonathan tells her a story about how the previous fall, he and Clark went on a trip through space without her knowing. While they were traveling, they heard a distress signal from the star system over, and Clark faced against a sun eater to save trillions of lives, flying through an impossible amount of red sun radiation, having to move faster than the speed of light to do the impossible, and yet somehow he does it. Jonathan tells all this to Martha despite promising Clark he never would, because he knows that his son, no matter what, can always achieve the impossible. Not only is this a great little story that showcases the insurmountable odds that Superman faces on a daily basis, but also it reminds me a lot of the quote that Grant Morrison said when talking about All-Star Superman. Superman, despite being a godlike being, is no different than you or me. He has the same life and the same problems as all of us, just on a much larger scale. And this is no different. For all intents and purposes, he's on a road trip with his dad. It's basically Superman Goofy movie, which that's really high praise. This is also the only Superman solo comic to be written by Dwayne McDuffie. McDuffie was a legend in the comics industry with his run on JLA, his landmark work with the DCAU, but also his creation of milestone comics, including Static and Icon and so many original Black characters. Genuinely, if there is to be a Mount Rushmore of comic creators, I fully believe McDuffie needs to be up there. And the last Superman comic that I think deserves more love is Greg Pak's run on the New 52 Action Comics. More specifically, the storyline Truth from 2015 with art by Aaron Cooter. I know New 52 Superman has kind of a bad rap, but I always thought that New 52 Action Comics was pretty consistently incredible. This was technically part of the DCU era after Convergence, which was a company-wide shakeup for its biggest characters. Commissioner Gordon was Batman, Hal Jordan went rogue with the Power Gauntlet, Wonder Woman was the new God of War, and Superman lost his powers. He can't fly, he can be hurt, he's weaker than he's ever been, and not only that, the entire world knows his secret identity. But regardless, he still continues to be Superman, wearing jeans and a t-shirt with the classic Fleischer logo that he bought at a drugstore, riding around the country on a motorcycle, still trying his best to help others. Normally, I don't really care for Superman stories where he's been depowered. I think that tends to be a trope made by people who think the character can't be interesting, but Pak's run is different, and the best moment that showcases this is in issue number 42. Clark returns to Metropolis to discover that the police have surrounded his neighborhood, where there's a peaceful protest from people throughout Metropolis showing their support for Superman and for Clark. The police escalate the situation and start to forcibly disperse the crowd, so Superman takes a massive chain and with all of his remaining strength, steps between the protesters and the police, saying that if he can't fight for them, he'll stand with them. It's an image that even 10 years later just becomes more and more powerful as history rages on. I fully believe that the symbol of Superman represents an ideal, that we all have the basic right to not only be alive, but also to thrive, just by nature of being on this little blue marble we call a home. That there is no such thing as an illegal person, and to never side with any administration or authority that tries to say otherwise. It's a story that isn't saying Superman is only interesting without his powers, it's saying you don't need super strength or invincibility to do good, to always stand up to bullies. Because if Superman can still be Superman without his powers, what's stopping you? I think the biggest takeaway I want to leave this video off with, aside from just showcasing these great stories, is that, and I'm not trying to gatekeep here, I think people need to read more comics. But that's not your fault. We live in this era nowadays where the comics is seen as this nebulous idea, something to only think about when adapting an IP for a movie. And the comics mainly just consists of the same 5 or 6 books, the must-reads, the Mount Rushmore. And those books are incredible, of course they are. But I think because of how often things like All-Star or For All Seasons get talked about, there's this mentality that it all just ends there. When in reality, there's more to Superman than All-Star. There's more to Batman than Year One or The Long Halloween. And frankly, there might even be stories and comics that you connect with more than those greatest hits. You might manage to stumble upon a random issue of Action Comics from 1968 that hits you on an emotional level you weren't prepared for. Because that's the beauty of the comics medium, that there's always more to discover. You can never know every single thing. With almost a century's worth of amazing stories from a revolving door of creators, including some of the most talented people to ever grace the page, like Darwin Cook, Dwayne McDuffie, Kurt Busiek, and so many more. Ideas and stories from both the past, the present, and those yet to come. But what are some Superman comics that you think don't get the love they deserve? If you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Special thanks to Twitch, Ismail Fakir, Kai, Eric, Poem Noir, Teddy Osio, David Deister, Legends Pops, Damian Leakey, Black Uchiha, A-Storm, Austin Salinas, Rocket, and Kai Spinxes for joining us Spectacular Fanboys on my Patreon and channel members. This has been Troyboy17. Be responsible, and I'll see you around.